My name is Colton Parker, 68 years old and retired owner of Parker Construction. I built our country house with my own hands for Margaret, my late wife. Amanda, my only daughter, was the light of my life until she married Jackson. That fateful dinner changed everything when he whispered in her ear and suddenly I was sleeping in my own garage. 2 cold nights surrounded by memories gave me clarity. On the 3rd night, I handed them an eviction notice. Their faces turned pale when they realized what was happening. Where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how I uncovered the truth behind my son-in-law's ultimate betrayal. I started Parker Construction from nothing back in '78 with just a pickup truck, a toolbox, and determination. For 40 years, I built homes for families across 3 counties, eventually growing into a company with 50 employees. Hard work was my religion, and honesty my creed. The business thrived because people knew they could trust a Parker promise. Margaret was my high school sweetheart. We married at 20 and built our life brick by brick, just like the houses I constructed. She handled the books for the company while raising our daughter Amanda. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable and happy. When Amanda came along, our world became complete. 5 years ago, Margaret lost her battle with ovarian cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months, but my Margaret was a fighter. She held on for almost 2 years. Those final months taught me more about love and strength than all my years of construction. Every day I sat by her hospital bed holding her hand, telling her stories about our life together, making her laugh even when the pain was unbearable. After she passed, I threw myself into work and being there for Amanda. She was 28 then, teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. Smart as a whip, just like her mother, with the same kind smile and infectious laugh. Weekends we would meet for lunch, go hiking, or work on projects around the house. Sometimes she would just come over and we would watch old westerns together, a tradition from her childhood. 3 years ago, Amanda was maid of honor at her college roommate's wedding. That's where she met Jackson Thompson. He was the best man, tall, confident, with perfect teeth, and a fancy job in financial consulting. I still remember when she brought him home to meet me. He arrived in a shiny BMW, dressed like he stepped out of a magazine, complimenting everything from my house to my workshop. "Sir, I can tell you're a man who appreciates quality craftsmanship," he said, examining the mantel I had carved by hand. "Amanda tells me you built this entire house yourself. That kind of skill is rare these days." I admit his charm worked on me initially. He seemed attentive to Amanda, opening doors, remembering small details about her preferences. When he asked questions about my business, he listened with what appeared to be genuine interest. For the first time since Margaret died, Amanda seemed truly happy. Their courtship moved faster than a summer storm. Within 4 months, he proposed with a diamond ring so large it looked out of place on my practical daughter's hand. Something in my gut tightened when they announced their engagement, but I pushed the feeling aside. Who was I to question her happiness? "Dad, when you just know Amanda," said her eyes shining. "Jackson makes me feel special every single day." I threw myself into helping with the wedding. They wanted a big affair, nothing like the simple ceremony Margaret and I had. I wrote a check for $75,000 to cover the costs, nearly depleting the vacation fund Margaret and I had set aside for our retirement. The wedding was beautiful, but looking back, I notice now how Jackson seemed more interested in impressing his business associates than celebrating with Amanda. The first subtle warning signs appeared during the wedding planning. Jackson insisted on controlling every detail from the flowers to the font on the invitations. When Amanda suggested something, he would smile and say, "Trust me, honey, this will be better." She would yield every time. I also noticed how he would check her phone when she wasn't looking, his expression darkening if she received messages from male friends. After the wedding, Amanda started visiting less frequently. When she did come by, she would glance at her watch, continuously explaining that Jackson expected dinner at exactly 6:30. Her once vibrant wardrobe shifted to muted colors that Jackson prefers. She dropped several longtime friendships because Jackson found her friends immature or bad influences. The country house has always been special to our family. I built it when Amanda was 10 years old on 20 acres of wooded land about 40 minutes outside the city. Margaret designed every room, creating spaces filled with light and warmth. The wraparound porch was where we ate summer dinners, the fireplace where we roasted marshmallows during winter storms. Every floorboard and doorframe contained memories of our family. 6 months ago, Jackson lost his job at the financial firm. He claimed it was due to company restructuring, but something about his explanation seemed rehearsed. Around the same time, budget cuts at Amanda's school reduced her to part-time teaching. Their financial situation deteriorated quickly. One Sunday afternoon, they arrived for dinner looking unusually tense. After the meal, Jackson cleared his throat and put his arm around Amanda. "Colton, we have a temporary situation we need to discuss," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "With the current job market and housing costs, we were thinking it might make sense for us to move in here for a short while, just until I secure my next position, which should be any day now." Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes as Jackson explained their plan. Despite my reservations, I agreed. This was my daughter, after all. The house had 4 bedrooms, plenty of space for all of us. And truthfully, after years alone, I welcomed the company. The first month went reasonably well. Amanda cooked dinner most nights, and Jackson talked enthusiastically about job interviews and networking opportunities. We established loose household rules, and I tried to give them privacy. I even moved my bedroom to the ground floor to give them the entire upstairs. I truly believed we were helping each other through a difficult time. How wrong I was. The shift happened so gradually that I almost missed it. Like termites in a foundation, the problems started small but steadily undermined the structure of our living arrangement. It began with changes around the house. I came home one day to find the living room completely rearranged. The leather recliner Margaret had given me for our 35th anniversary, my favorite spot to read and watch television, had been relegated to the corner to make room for an expensive gaming setup Jackson had purchased. "We thought the space needed refreshing," Jackson explained when I questioned the change. "The old arrangement was blocking the natural flow of the room." Before I could object, Amanda chimed in. "Dad, we need to modernize a little. This place is stuck in the 90s. The house Margaret and I designed together was suddenly outdated. Within weeks, they had replaced throw pillows, rearranged furniture, and taken down several family photos in favor of abstract art Jackson selected. Each change erased a little more of Margaret and our history together. Jackson began criticizing my daily habits, the way I loaded the dishwasher, my morning coffee routine that apparently took too long, even how I organized my tools in my own workshop. "Colton, have you considered that your method of categorizing screws by size rather than function is inefficient?" he said, one Saturday, standing in the doorway of my sanctuary. "I reorganized them for you. You will thank me later." My workshop had been my private space for decades. Now I couldn't find anything. When I expressed frustration, Amanda sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Dad, Jackson is just trying to help. You know how set in your ways you can be." I didn't recognize this new version of my daughter who now parroted Jackson's criticisms and complaints. The Amanda I raised would never have dismissed my feelings so casually. Somehow, in just a few months of marriage, her perspective had shifted to see me as a problem to be managed, rather than her father to be respected. Despite my growing discomfort, I tried to accommodate them. I adjusted my schedule to shower at night instead of mornings, because Jackson needed the bathroom at 7:30 sharp. I stopped watching the news in the living room because it created negative energy in their workspace. I even started eating dinner earlier than I preferred because Jackson insisted on strictly timed meals. One evening, I overheard Jackson on the phone with Amanda while I was in the garden. "You need to distance yourself from Lisa," he was saying firmly. "Her divorce is making her bitter, and she will only bring you down. Besides, we agreed you would focus on supporting my career networking right now, not wasting time with lunch dates." Lisa had been Amanda's best friend since college. They had spoken daily for years. When I asked Amanda about it later, she brushed it off. "Jackson just wants what is best for me." Lisa has been really negative lately. These concerning conversations became more frequent, but I dismissed them as normal marital adjustments. I told myself all newlyweds go through rough patches while establishing boundaries. Meanwhile, Jackson's spending habits contradicted their supposed financial crisis. Despite being unemployed for months, he purchased new golf clubs, designer clothes, and the latest electronics. When I gently inquired about their job search progress, they became defensive. "The market is tough right now," Jackson would say, straightening his expensive watch. "But I have several promising leads. These networking events are investments in our future." The financial burden of supporting 3 adults fell entirely on me. Grocery bills tripled, the electricity usage spiked with all their devices, constantly charging, and somehow I was now paying for their cell phone plan and car insurance too. Just until things turn around, Amanda assured me, though she never mentioned repayment. Jackson began inviting friends over without asking. Loud, boisterous men who drank my whiskey and left messes for me to clean up. They would take over the living room for poker nights that left cigar smoke embedded in the curtains Margaret had sewn. One morning I discovered my fishing gear missing from the garage. When I asked about it, Jackson casually mentioned he had loaned it to a friend. "Your stuff was just gathering dust anyway," he said with a shrug. I began noticing other items disappeared or were moved without my knowledge. Photo albums, financial documents, even my wedding ring I kept in a box on my dresser after Margaret died. It would eventually reappear in a different location, but the pattern was disturbing. The final straw came when I discovered Jackson had been opening my mail. Bank statements, pension information correspondence from my lawyer about the construction company. All had been carefully opened and resealed. I confronted him that evening while Amanda was present, hoping for accountability. "Jackson, I found my personal mail opened on your desk. That crossed a line." He laughed dismissively. "The mail carrier must have mixed up our names. We are both living here after all." Before I could respond, Amanda interrupted. "Dad, why are you always looking for problems? Jackson would never invade your privacy. You probably opened those letters and forgot." Her defense of his obvious lie stunned me. We argued with Amanda, accusing me of being paranoid and untrusting. For the first time in her life, she raised her voice to me, saying, I was jealous of their relationship and trying to control them. That night, lying awake in bed, I realized with a heavy heart that the rift between my daughter and me had grown into a chasm. Somehow, in less than 6 months, I had become a stranger in my own home and an adversary to my only child. Amanda's 32nd birthday fell on a Saturday in April. Despite the growing tension in the house, I was determined to make it special. In the years since Margaret past birthdays had become our tradition, a time to celebrate and remember happier days. I woke at dawn and drove 30 miles to the farmer's market for fresh ingredients. The menu would be all of Amanda's childhood favorites. Margaret's famous pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes, homemade rolls, and strawberry shortcake for dessert. Margaret had documented all her recipes in a leather-bound notebook, complete with notes and modifications. I followed each instruction meticulously. The kitchen filled with familiar aromas as I worked. For a few hours it felt like Margaret was there with me, guiding my hands as I prepared the meal she had made countless times for our family celebrations. I set the dining room table with our best china, the set we only used for special occasions, and arranged fresh flowers as a centerpiece. This will fix things, I told myself as I stirred the gravy. Good food and good memories will remind Amanda of who we really are to each other. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. Amanda came downstairs wearing a new dress, her hair styled differently than usual. She smiled when she saw the table. "Dad, this looks amazing," she said, giving me a quick hug, just like Mom used to do. For a moment, my daughter was back. The Amanda who appreciated thoughtful gestures and shared my memories of Margaret. The knot in my chest loosened slightly. "Jackson will be a little late," she added, checking her phone. He had an important networking call that ran long. An hour later, we were still waiting. The food had to be returned to the oven to stay warm. Amanda kept sending texts, her expression growing increasingly anxious. Jackson finally arrived at 7:45, not apologetic but annoyed that we had waited. "You should have started without me," he said, loosening his tie. "These investor calls can go on forever, but they are crucial for our future." He barely acknowledged the effort I had put into the meal, taking a business call during the first course and typing emails between bites of the main dish. Amanda kept glancing at him nervously, her earlier warmth toward me cooling by degrees. Despite the rocky start, I was determined to salvage the evening. When Jackson finally put his phone away, the conversation improved. Amanda talked about returning to full-time teaching next fall, and I shared funny stories from her childhood that made her laugh genuinely for the first time in months. As we finished the main course, I decided to share my news. "I have been thinking about the construction company," I said, refilling our water glasses. "My old partner Frank made an offer to buy out my remaining shares. After 40 years, it might be time to fully retire." Jackson's attention sharpened instantly. He set down his fork and leaned forward. "That sounds like a wise decision, Colton. Running a business at your age must be exhausting. What kind of numbers are we talking about for the buyout?" His sudden interest was palpable. I explained that Frank's offer was substantial, $750,000, for my remaining 30% ownership. "Plus, I need to update my will and estate planning," I continued. "My lawyer suggested setting up a trust to minimize taxes. I would like your input on this, Amanda, since it all affects your future." Jackson's expression changed subtly. A calculating look passed over his features before his usual charming smile returned. He asked detailed questions about the potential sale timeline, the payment structure, and my investment plans for the proceeds. As I answered, I noticed him shift closer to Amanda. While I was explaining the different options my financial advisor had suggested, Jackson leaned over and whispered something in her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but the effect was immediate and dramatic. Amanda's face transformed. The warmth and connection we had been rebuilding throughout dinner vanished, replaced by a cold, defensive expression. She pushed her dessert plate away untouched. "Dad," she said in a voice I hardly recognized, "Jackson and I need to talk to you about something important." The atmosphere in the dining room shifted like storm clouds rolling in. Jackson placed his hand over Amanda's in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but his grip looked tight enough to hurt. Colton, Jackson began in his smooth professional tone. "Amanda and I have been concerned about your behavior lately. Your constant interference in our marriage is becoming problematic." I stared at them, fork suspended midair. My interference. "What are you talking about?" Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes as she spoke. "You criticize Jackson constantly. You question his job search, his friends, his decisions. You undermine him at every turn." Each accusation felt like a physical blow. None of it was true. If anything, I had been excessively accommodating to preserve peace in the house. "You are becoming increasingly forgetful and paranoid," Jackson continued, "accusing me of going through your mail, moving your things. Amanda and I are worried about your mental state." "That is absolutely not true," I protested, anger rising in my chest. "Jackson, you know very well that you have been opening my mail and rearranging my belongings." Amanda slammed her hand on the table. "See, this is exactly what we are talking about. You always blame Jackson for everything." The conversation escalated quickly. With each denial, they produced another accusation, all fabricated or twisted versions of reality. According to them, I had become bitter and controlling, jealous of their relationship, unable to accept that Amanda had a life separate from me. "I think you need to give us some space," Amanda finally said, her voice cold. "Just for tonight. Things will look better in the morning." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Are you asking me to leave my own house?" Jackson stepped in. "Not leave permanently. Just give Amanda some breathing room for her birthday. You can sleep in the garage apartment for tonight. It has that fold-out couch, right? By tomorrow, we can discuss this more calmly." "The garage does not have an apartment," I said incredulously. "It is an unfinished storage space, with no heating." Amanda stood up, arms crossed. One night in the garage will not kill you, Dad. We need this time alone to process how to move forward. If you really love me, you will respect my wishes." Those words, "if you really love me," hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter was using my love for her as a weapon. In that moment, I saw the full extent of Jackson's influence. The Amanda I raised would never be so cruel or manipulative. Numb with shock and heartbreak, I gathered my phone and a blanket. As I walked out of the house I had built with my own hands, I heard Jackson's voice behind me. "This is for the best, Colton. We all need boundaries." The spring night was cold as I made my way to the garage. With each step on the gravel path, the reality of my situation became clearer. I was being manipulated and pushed out of my own home by the man who had married my daughter. And somehow, he had turned her against me in the process. The garage door closed behind me with a hollow finality. Surrounded by boxes and tools in the chilly darkness, I sat on an old lawn chair and allowed myself for the first time to weep. The garage was cold and smelled of motor oil and dust. I switched on the single overhead bulb and surveyed my new accommodations of concrete floors, exposed insulation in the walls, and piles of storage boxes that had accumulated over decades. The space heater I kept for winter projects would provide minimal warmth, but it was better than nothing. I cleared a small area among the boxes and unfolded an old camping cot I kept for fishing trips. As I arranged my makeshift bed, a sense of unreality washed over me. How had I ended up here, exiled from my own house on my daughter's birthday? Unable to sleep, I began examining the boxes surrounding me. Most contained old holiday decorations, camping equipment, and memorabilia Margaret had organized before her illness. One cardboard box labeled Amanda, school years, caught my attention. Inside were carefully preserved report cards, art projects, and photographs documenting Amanda's childhood. I found a Father's Day card she had made in second grade with a crayon drawing of the two of us fishing. "To the best daddy in the world," she had written in uneven letters. "I love you bigger than the sky." Another box contained photo albums chronicling our family history. Margaret had been meticulous about documentation, creating beautiful albums with detailed captions. I found pictures of the three of us at Amanda's college graduation, her face beaming with pride as she stood between Margaret and me in her cap and gown. One album in particular brought tears to my eyes, images from the years after Margaret's diagnosis, when Amanda had moved back home temporarily to help care for her mother. The pictures showed the two of them gardening together, Margaret teaching Amanda how to make her famous apple pie despite her weakened state. The love between them was palpable, even in these frozen moments. The contrast between the daughter in these photographs and the cold woman who had banished me to the garage was heartbreaking. What had happened to change her so dramatically? The answer seemed clear. Jackson had systematically worked to separate Amanda from her past and reshape her perceptions. As I continued exploring the garage's contents, I discovered a box I didn't recognize tucked behind my workbench. It contained financial documents, but not mine. These were papers Jackson had apparently hidden. Credit card statements showing massive debt collection notices and gambling receipts from casinos in 3 states. More disturbing were draft letters to a real estate agent discussing the potential sale of the property once Jackson had secured full control. The property in question could only be my home. There was also a half-completed loan application using the house as collateral, requiring only the owner's signature. The pieces began falling into place. Jackson's sudden interest in my company sailed his questions about my will the opened mail. He had been gathering financial information all along. His ultimate goal appeared to be gaining control of my assets with my house as the first target. Sleep was impossible now. I spent the night reviewing the evidence and recalling every interaction with Jackson through this new lens. His charm, his strategic compliments, his gradual isolation of Amanda, all classic manipulation tactics I had been too blind to recognize. Morning came with the sound of car doors slamming. Through the garage window, I watched Jackson leave for another networking event dressed expensively, as always. Amanda remained in the house, and I hoped to speak with her alone. When I approached the back door, Amanda opened it only wide enough to hand me a towel and a change of clothes. "I cannot talk right now," she said, her eyes red from crying. "Jackson thinks we need more time apart." "Amanda, please. There are things you need to know about Jackson," I pleaded. "He said you would try to turn me against him," she replied mechanically. "He warned me about your jealousy." Before I could respond, she closed the door. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pick up her phone, likely reporting my attempted conversation to Jackson. With nowhere else to go, I returned to the garage. Throughout the day, I heard Amanda moving around the house, but she never came to check on me. Around noon, I overheard fragments of a heated phone conversation through the partially open garage window. "You are moving too fast," Amanda was saying, her voice tense. "My father is not just going to sign over the house. He built it himself." Jackson's reply was inaudible, but Amanda's response was clear. "I know what we agreed, but this feels wrong. He raised me by himself after Mom got sick." The call ended abruptly, and I heard what sounded like crying. A small hope flickered in my heart. Perhaps Amanda was beginning to see through Jackson's manipulation. As night fell on my second day in exile, I became more methodical. Using the light from my phone, I conducted a thorough search of the remaining boxes. In a container marked electronics recycling, I found my old laptop. The battery was dead, but I located a charger and waited impatiently for it to power up. To my surprise, the laptop still functioned. More importantly, it contained access to the home security system I had installed after Margaret died. The cameras covering the driveway, front door, and backyard had been recording continuously to cloud storage that I had forgotten about. For hours, I reviewed footage from the past 6 months. What I discovered confirmed my worst fears. Multiple clips showed Jackson searching through my office when no one was home, photographing documents and making calls while looking at my financial papers. In one particularly damning video, Jackson was speaking to someone on the phone while standing in the backyard. The old man has no idea what is happening. Once we get him declared incompetent, the house and business proceeds are as good as ours. Amanda trusts me completely. She will sign whatever I put in front of her. I felt physically ill listening to his calculated plans. This was elder financial abuse, pure and simple. Jackson had identified me as a target, married my daughter to gain access, and was now working to remove me from the equation entirely. The night grew colder, but I barely noticed. Using my phone, I contacted Thomas Williams, my attorney of 30 years and trusted friend. Despite the late hour, he answered. "Colton, what is wrong? You sound terrible." I explained my situation in detail, from Jackson and Amanda, moving into my current exile in the garage. Thomas listened without interruption, then spoke firmly. "Stay where you are for now. Document everything. Tomorrow morning, come to my office first thing. Bring whatever evidence you have gathered." He added, "And Colton, remember that Amanda is a victim here too. This type of manipulation is incredibly powerful. Do not give up on her." Those words gave me the strength to endure another night in the cold garage. My daughter, my Amanda, was somewhere inside the stranger who had turned against me. I just needed to find a way to reach her. With renewed purpose, I continued my investigation. Using the laptop's connection, I researched financial manipulation and coercive control in relationships. The patterns described matched Jackson's behavior perfectly. Isolation of the victim, financial exploitation, gaslighting, and turning family members against each other. As dawn broke on the third day, I had a comprehensive understanding of what we were facing and the beginnings of a plan to fight back. Thomas Williams' law office opened at 8:30, but he was waiting for me at 7:45. His silver hair and bow tie were as impeccable as always, a reassuring constant in my upended world. He ushered me inside, concern evident in his eyes. "You look like hell, Colton," he said, pouring me coffee. "When you said you slept in the garage, I thought you meant a guest room above it." No such luxury, I replied gratefully, accepting the hot drink. Just concrete floors and power tools for company. For the next hour, I shared everything. The documents I had found, the security footage, the conversations I had overheard, and the dramatic change in Amanda's behavior since marrying Jackson. Thomas took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Based on what you have described, we are dealing with a classic case of elder financial exploitation combined with coercive control, he said when I finished. Unfortunately, I have seen this pattern before. Predators like Jackson target individuals with assets, but limited family connections, making widowers particularly vulnerable. Thomas pulled up public records on his computer. Jackson Arthur Thompson, 36 years old. Let me run a background check. What we discovered confirmed my suspicions, and worse. Jackson had 2 previous bankruptcies and a history of failed business ventures. More disturbing were the restraining orders filed by 2 former girlfriends, both claiming financial exploitation and emotional abuse. He has refined his technique, Thomas observed grimly. The previous relationships show the same pattern: charm, isolation, financial control, then abandonment once assets are secured. Thomas made several calls to contacts in banking and law enforcement. By noon, we had uncovered evidence that Jackson had accumulated over $80,000 in gambling debts at casinos across the state. He had also attempted to take out loans using falsified income statements. Most shocking was the discovery that Jackson had been using Amanda's teaching salary to make minimum payments on his credit cards while continuing to accumulate debt. Her previously excellent credit score had plummeted since their marriage. What about Amanda? I asked, my heart heavy. How do I help her see what is happening? Thomas leaned back in his chair. Confronting victims of coercive control directly rarely works. They have been conditioned to defend their abuser and distrust outside perspectives. We need allies, people Amanda trusts who are not under Jackson's influence. I thought immediately of Sarah Peterson, Amanda's childhood friend, who had been maid of honor at her wedding, but had seemingly fallen out of favor with Jackson soon after. I had always liked Sarah, a straightforward, loyal person who had known Amanda since elementary school. Thomas suggested I contact Sarah while he continued gathering legal evidence. When I called, Sarah answered immediately. Mr. Parker, I have been so worried about Amanda. She barely responds to my messages anymore. Over lunch at a cafe far from my neighborhood, Sarah shared her concerns. Amanda had called her in tears several times over the past months, but would suddenly end conversations if Jackson entered the room. She had canceled plans last minute after checking with Jackson and had stopped sharing details about her life. The last time we spoke, she said, Jackson thought I was a negative influence because I am divorced, Sarah said, stirring her coffee. The Amanda I know would never judge me that way. It was like hearing a stranger using her voice. Sarah provided screenshots of text conversations showing Amanda's gradual withdrawal and Jackson's increasing control over her social life. In one particularly telling exchange, Amanda had written, "Need to check with Jay before committing to lunch. He manages our schedule now to maximize efficiency." Armed with Sarah's testimony and additional evidence, I returned to Thomas's office. We discovered that Jackson had been systematically intercepting my calls and messages to Amanda, often deleting them before she could see them. He had also been spreading false stories about me to extended family members, claiming I was becoming forgetful and combative. Classic isolation techniques, Thomas explained. He is creating an alternative narrative about you while cutting off Amanda's support system. By late afternoon, we had compiled a comprehensive file documenting Jackson's manipulation and financial schemes. Thomas outlined our legal options. As the sole owner of the house, you have every right to evict them, he said. However, our goal is not just removing Jackson, but helping Amanda recognize the manipulation. We crafted a strategic approach. First, formal eviction papers naming both Amanda and Jackson, quote, not as punishment for Amanda, but as legal leverage. Second, a separate folder of evidence to show Amanda privately focusing on Jackson's financial exploitation of her rather than his manipulation of me. Third, arrangements for alternative housing for Amanda if she chose to leave Jackson. We need to be prepared for Jackson to escalate when confronted, Thomas warned. Men like him can become dangerous when their control is threatened. I contacted my neighbor, retired police officer Frank Watkins, to alert him to the situation. He offered his guest house as a safe place for Amanda if needed. We also established financial protections. New accounts. Jackson couldn't access credit monitoring and a freeze on any transactions involving my property. Thomas prepared paperwork to protect my assets and business interests. The afternoon stretched into evening as we refined our approach. I practiced what I would say to Amanda, focusing on expressing concern rather than accusation. Thomas role-played potential reactions from Jackson, preparing me for denial, anger, and manipulation tactics. Remember, Thomas emphasized, Jackson will try to make this about you versus him, with Amanda forced to choose. Your job is to make it about Amanda's well-being and future. By nightfall, our plan was in place. Thomas drove me back to the house, helping carry the legal documents and evidence folders. Get some rest if you can, he advised, squeezing my shoulder. Tomorrow will be challenging, but you are doing the right thing. Call me immediately if anything goes wrong. Alone again in the cold garage, I found pen and paper and wrote a letter to Amanda, not about Jackson or the current situation, but about her childhood, our family memories, and the values Margaret and I had tried to instill in her. I wrote about her strength, her kindness, and her resilience. I wanted to remind her of who she truly was beneath the layers of manipulation. No matter what happens tomorrow, I concluded, know that my love for you is unconditional and unchanging. It always has been and always will be. I sealed the letter and placed it in my pocket. Then, sitting on the uncomfortable cot surrounded by the evidence of our shattered family life, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would either save my daughter or lose her forever. The morning of the third day dawned clear and cold. I had barely slept, mentally rehearsing what needed to be said and steeling myself for the difficult conversation ahead. Thomas had advised waiting until both Amanda and Jackson were present. A united confrontation would be more difficult for Jackson to manipulate. I knew Jackson typically returned from his morning coffee run around 9:30. Through the garage window, I watched for his car. When the sleek BMW pulled into the driveway, I gathered the documents, took a deep breath, and prepared to reclaim my home and hopefully my daughter. The house felt different as I entered, subtly altered in ways that went beyond the furniture rearrangement. Family photos had been removed from walls, replaced with generic artwork. The Afghan Margaret had crocheted was gone from the back of the sofa. Even the air smelled different. Jackson's expensive cologne had overpowered the natural pine and cinnamon scent I associated with home. Jackson was in the kitchen arranging pastries on a plate. His expression shifted from surprise to calculated composure when he saw me. "Colton," he said smoothly, "we were not expecting you inside this morning. Amanda and I were just discussing next steps for our living arrangement." Amanda entered from the hallway, her face pale and eyes avoiding mine. She stood slightly behind Jackson, physically positioning herself under his protection. "Dad," she said quietly, "we agreed you would give us space." "I have given you 2 nights," I replied calmly. "Now we need to talk." Jackson's posture changed subtly, shoulders squaring, chin lifting in challenge. He moved to stand between Amanda and me, in a display of dominance. "Actually, Amanda and I have been talking," he said. "We think it might be best if you considered assisted living options. This house is really too large for you to maintain alone, and your recent behavior suggests you might benefit from a structured environment." The audacity was breathtaking. 3 days ago, I had been forced into my garage, and now they were suggesting I should permanently leave my home for an institution. Without responding to his provocation, I placed the legal folder on the kitchen table and opened it. "This is a formal eviction notice," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It gives you 48 hours to vacate the premises." The color drained from Jackson's face as he scanned the document. Amanda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You cannot be serious," Jackson sputtered, his confident facade cracking. "This is Amanda's childhood home. You would throw your own daughter out." "Amanda is named in the notice because legally, I have to include all adult occupants," I explained, looking directly at my daughter. "But this is really about you, Jackson." "Dad, how could you do this?" Amanda cried, tears filling her eyes. "After everything we have done for you." Jackson quickly regained his composure, placing an arm around Amanda's shoulders. "This is exactly what I warned you about, honey. Your father has become irrational and vindictive. We will fight this legally, of course. Before you consider that option," I continued calmly, "you might want to review this evidence." I opened the second folder and began methodically laying out the documents. First, the security camera footage showing Jackson searching my office and photographing my financial documents. Then the draft letters to real estate agents discussing the sale of my house. Finally, the credit card statements showing Amanda's salary being used to service Jackson's gambling debts. "These are just some highlights," I said. "Thomas Williams has prepared a complete file for the district attorney regarding elder financial abuse, identity theft, mail fraud, and coercive control." Jackson's expression darkened. "You are clearly fabricating evidence because you cannot accept Amanda's independence. These documents prove nothing." But Amanda had picked up the credit card statements, her hands trembling as she reviewed them. "Jackson, this shows payments from my personal account to your credit cards. Over $4,000 last month alone." "Investments, honey," he said quickly. "Remember we discussed diversifying our finances. This is all part of our long-term strategy." "What about these casino receipts?" she asked, her voice growing stronger. "And these collection notices from gambling debts? Were those investments too?" Jackson's charm evaporated instantly. "Put those down. You do not understand financial management." I produced the laptop and played the damning recording of Jackson's backyard phone call. The old man has no idea what is happening. Once we get him declared incompetent, the house and business proceeds are as good as ours. Amanda stepped away from Jackson, her eyes wide with shock. "Declared incompetent, Jackson? What is he talking about?" He has clearly manipulated that recording. Jackson snapped, but sweat had begun to form on his brow. "Your father is desperate to keep controlling you, Amanda. He has never accepted our marriage." I maintained my calm, remembering Thomas's advice to make this about Amanda's well-being, not a competition between Jackson and me. "Amanda," I said gently, "I am not asking you to choose between us. I am asking you to look at the evidence and think about the changes in your life since you married Jackson, the friends you have lost contact with, the decisions that are no longer yours to make, the way your own salary disappears while Jackson makes expensive purchases." Jackson tried to interrupt, but Amanda held up her hand, silencing him. She was examining the falsified loan application that had her forged signature. "This is not my handwriting," she said, her teacher's eye for detail catching the discrepancy immediately. "Jackson, did you sign my name to a loan application?" "Of course not," he scoffed, but his denial lacked conviction. "Then explain this," she continued, pointing to the document. "The loop on my A is all wrong, and I never connect my D and A, like this." Jackson's facade crumbled completely. "So what if I did? We are married. Your assets are my assets. That is how marriage works." "No," Amanda said firmly. "That is not how marriage works at all." Jackson sensed he was losing control. His tactics shifted from denial to attack. "Fine," he snarled, his charming mask discarded. "Let me tell you how it really island. Your father is a simple contractor who got lucky. I have an MBA from Wharton. Do you really think I was going to waste my potential living on a teacher's salary? This house, his business equity, it was always about the assets." Amanda flinched, as if struck. "You married me for my father's money." "Do not act so shocked," Jackson sneered. "You were 30 and desperate when we met. What did you think attracted me to you? Your fascinating insights on third-grade reading levels." The cruel words hung in the air. I fought the urge to physically remove him from my house for speaking to my daughter that way. But this was Amanda's moment of clarity, and she needed to handle it herself. Amanda straightened her shoulders, a familiar determination crossing her face. Quote, the same expression she had worn as a child, facing down playground bullies or difficult math problems. Get out, she said quietly. Excuse me, Jackson's voice dripped with condescension. Get out of this house, Amanda repeated louder this time. She moved to stand beside me. My father was right about you all along. Jackson looked from Amanda to me, calculating his next move. You are making a huge mistake, both of you. Without me, you will go back to your pathetic little lives, an old man waiting to die and a spinster schoolteacher. Amanda did not waver. I would rather be a spinster schoolteacher than married to a con man and a bully. Jackson grabbed his keys from the counter. This is not over. I will be speaking to my attorney. I think you will find that difficult, I said calmly. Given the evidence of financial fraud we have uncovered, your legal options are limited. Thomas Williams has already been in touch with the district attorney. They are very interested in your pattern of behavior with previous relationships as well. For the first time, real fear flashed across Jackson's face. Without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Through the window, we watched him peel out of the driveway gravel, spraying behind his expensive car. In the sudden silence, Amanda stood perfectly still, shock evident on her face. Then, like a dam breaking, she began to sob, deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from her very core. I opened my arms, and she fell into them, clinging to me, as she had as a child after nightmares. I am so sorry, Dad, she cried against my shoulder. I am so sorry. I held my daughter close, my own tears flowing freely. It is okay, Amanda. You are going to be okay. In that moment, among the scattered evidence of Jackson's betrayal, we began the long process of healing and rebuilding what had been broken. The silence after Jackson left was profound. The house seemed to exhale, as if a toxin had been purged from its rooms. Amanda and I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of betrayal, both struggling to process the seismic shift in our reality. I do not even know where to begin, Amanda whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of a falsified document. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? You were not stupid, I said firmly. Jackson is a skilled manipulator who has done this before. This was never your fault. Her tears came in waves, as the full weight of the deception settled on her shoulders. Through broken sentences, Amanda began sharing how the manipulation had developed. Jackson had started with small criticisms of her appearance, and friends always couched as concern for her well-being. He gradually took control of their finances to reduce her stress, monitored her phone because he worried about her safety, and isolated her from friends who did not support their marriage goals. He made me believe you were becoming forgetful and paranoid, she admitted, shame coloring her words. Every time you confronted him about something legitimate, he would later explain it away as your confusion or jealousy. He kept saying we needed to consider guardianship options because your mental health was declining. The calculated cruelty of turning a daughter against her father filled me with cold anger. But I kept my voice gentle. That is a common tactic in elder exploitation. Making family members doubt the victim's mental capacity makes the financial abuse easier to accomplish. Amanda's eyes widened. That night at dinner, when you mentioned selling the construction company, his whole demeanor changed. That is when he whispered to me that we needed to act quickly before you gave away my inheritance to scammers. There was never any risk of that, I assured her. Thomas has been handling my affairs for decades. I know that now, she said miserably. But Jackson had spent months telling me stories about elderly parents being taken advantage of. He positioned himself as your protector, while actually being the predator. As afternoon turned to evening, we continued talking. Amanda revealed more details of Jackson's control, how he checked her text messages, timed her trips to the grocery store, and criticized her if dinner was not prepared exactly to his specifications. What had appeared to be a passionate romance had actually been a calculated grooming process designed to erode her confidence and independence. "I almost lost you," she said, fresh tears flowing. "My own father. How could I have treated you so cruelly?" I took her hands in mine. "You never lost me, Amanda. I was here the whole time waiting for you to find your way back." That first night, Amanda was afraid Jackson might return. We contacted Officer Watkins, who parked his car at the end of our driveway as a precaution. Amanda slept in her childhood bedroom, the door locked, despite Jackson having taken his belongings when he stormed out. The next morning brought practical concerns. Thomas arrived early to help Amanda begin unraveling the financial damage Jackson had caused. Her credit score had plummeted, accounts had been drained, and her name had been fraudulently added to multiple loans. "This will take time to repair," Thomas explained, "but we have solid evidence of fraud. The credit bureaus will work with us once we file the police reports." Those police reports were difficult for Amanda. Admitting she had been manipulated and financially exploited required her to confront painful truths. Detective Maria Sanchez from the Financial Crimes Unit was compassionate but thorough, documenting every detail of Jackson's scheme. "You are not alone," Detective Sanchez told Amanda. "We see this pattern frequently. Predators like Jackson Thompson target kind, trusting people precisely because of those positive qualities." 2 days after the confrontation, Jackson attempted to return. He arrived with flowers, tearful apologies, and claims that he had started therapy. Amanda, with newfound strength, refused to even open the door. "My father has filed a restraining order," she told him through the closed door. "Please leave before I call the police." When manipulation failed, Jackson turned to threats, demanding his share of household items and insinuating he would spread rumors about Amanda's mental health at her school. Thomas handled these issues swiftly, sending cease and desist letters and informing Jackson's new attorney of the pending criminal charges. The legal proceedings moved forward. Jackson eventually accepted a plea deal on the fraud charges to avoid trial, receiving probation and mandatory financial restitution. The restraining order remained in place, creating a legal barrier between him and our family. More challenging than the legal issues was Amanda's emotional recovery. The shame and self-blame threatened to overwhelm her at times. On my recommendation, she began seeing Dr. Elaine Harper, a therapist, specializing in manipulation and coercive control. "Recovery is not linear," Dr. Harper explained during a joint session. "Amanda will have good days and difficult days. Your consistent support is crucial, Colton, but so are healthy boundaries as she rebuilds her sense of self." Those boundaries included Amanda finding her own apartment 3 months after the confrontation. Though I would have welcomed her staying longer, we both recognized the importance of her reclaiming her independence. I helped her move into a small but charming place near her school, close enough for regular visits but separate enough for healthy autonomy. Amanda joined a support group for survivors of manipulative relationships. Every Tuesday evening, she met with men and women who understood her experience without judgment. These connections proved invaluable, particularly on difficult days when memories of Jackson's manipulation surfaced unexpectedly. "The hardest part," she confided 6 months into her recovery, "is trusting my own judgment again. I keep questioning my perceptions and decisions. That will improve with time and practice," I assured her. "Your mother went through something similar after her brother manipulated her during a difficult time. She rebuilt her confidence decision by decision." Mentioning Margaret opened new avenues for healing. Amanda began asking questions about her mother that she had avoided since the funeral, particularly about Margaret's resilience during her long illness. These conversations brought both tears and laughter, reconnecting Amanda to the strength in her heritage. Gradually, Amanda reclaimed pieces of herself that Jackson had systematically dismantled. She reconnected with Sarah and other friends, returned to her book club, and eventually resumed teaching full-time. Her classroom became her sanctuary, a place where her competence and worth were never in question. 1 year after Jackson's departure, Amanda brought a date to Sunday dinner. Michael, a science teacher from her school. Unlike Jackson's overwhelming charm, Michael had a quiet authenticity that put no demands on Amanda's autonomy. I watched my daughter carefully for signs of lingering vulnerability, but saw instead healthy caution balanced with openness. Michael knows everything, she told me later, helping wash dishes. About Jackson, the manipulation, all of it. I needed him to understand my history and my boundaries. And how did he respond? I asked. He thanked me for trusting him with the truth, she said, a small smile playing at her lips. Then he shared his own past relationship mistakes. Real relationships start with honesty, not perfection. That wisdom reflected how far Amanda had come. The painful experience with Jackson had ultimately led to greater self-awareness and stronger boundaries. Though none of us would have chosen this path, the growth it prompted was undeniable. As for me, I learned valuable lessons about balancing protection with respect for Amanda's independence. I became more involved in community education about elder fraud, sharing our story in senior centers and church groups. These presentations always emphasized that manipulation can happen to anyone regardless of intelligence or education. The country house gradually returned to its former warmth. We rehung family photographs, restored Margaret's touches, and created new memories to layer over the painful ones. Amanda and I established a tradition of monthly projects to improve the property, working side by side as we had during her childhood. 2 years after that fateful dinner, Amanda stood with me in the backyard as we completed a garden bench dedicated to Margaret. Mom would have handled the situation with Jackson differently. Amanda mused, running her hand over the smooth wood. She always saw through people's facades. Perhaps I agreed, but she would be incredibly proud of how you reclaimed your life afterward. That resilience comes directly from her. Amanda leaned her head against my shoulder. I almost lost everything, because I forgot who I really was and where I came from. I will never make that mistake again. The strongest foundations, I told her, thinking of my construction days, are often built after a structural failure forces you to dig deeper and rebuild properly. The simple wisdom of that statement resonated with both of us. Our foundation had been tested severely, but what we rebuilt was stronger for the experience, reinforced by honest communication, appropriate boundaries, and unconditional love that manipulation could not permanently sever. Looking back on that night in the garage, surrounded by boxes and heartbreak, I never could have imagined the eventual positive outcome. The pain was real and necessary, but so was the healing that followed. Sometimes the only way forward is through the darkest parts of the journey. Have you ever experienced someone trying to come between you and a loved one? How did you handle that situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that manipulation thrives in isolation, so sharing these stories helps others recognize warning signs in their own relationships. Thank you for listening today, and may you always find the strength to protect your important relationships from those who would undermine them.